Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. My professionals are here. Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. John Fund of the National Review Online, who has a fresh piece up about Obamacare, Affordable Care Act right now, and a new challenge. And David Drucker of Washington Examiner, and we'll come in a moment to speak to David's piece about Harry Reid and the Senate and the discouraging news that there will be nothing new in the Senate. Harry Reid is doing a favor for those of his members who are at risk in red states. But we begin with two quotes from the President of the United States and his spokesperson. The first quote is the President voicing frustration with the GOP. The quote is, "If I sponsor a bill declaring apple pie American, it might fall victim to partisan politics." End quote, President of the United States. And then from Josh Earnest, the new spokesperson at the White House, there have been a number of situations in which you've seen this administration intervene in a meaningful way that has substantially improved the tranquility of the global community. End quote. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you. I begin with you, Thaddeus, to comment on what it is like in Washington, how it is that you can say foolish things and think that it's making news. Is this silly season in Washington? It's hot, it's July, people like to go on vacation, there are spectacular thunder and lightning storms, and I should just dismiss this as July foolishness, Thaddeus? Good evening again to you.
Good evening to you, John. Well, silly season in Washington is a very relative term because it seems to be silly all the time. With the President of the United States, recent statements that you've just laid out for the listeners, it strikes me that he sounds like a rather frustrated individual. It sounds like he knows that he's nearing the end, and he seems to be trying to, rationalize away or justify the gridlock that is in Washington, including within his own democratically held Senate, as Mr. Drucker will point out. But also he seems to be completely at a loss as to what constitutes tranquility in our little world these days.
David, a good evening to you. We're told by the Wall Street Journal's Colleen McCain-Nelson filing that the president is stymied in Washington, so he hits the road to eat fast food and ice cream and shoot pool with real people. David, is this understood to be the next strategy of the White House for the midterm election, for the president to roll up his sleeves? He's not on a ballot anywhere. Good evening to you, David.
Good evening, John. And look, I think when you're a president who is under threat politically and your party appears to be on the ropes in a midterm, you try and do what you can. And the president and Congress are not going to get anything meaningful done, and the president wants to, for very obvious campaign reasons, try and paint the Republicans as the spoil sports because he doesn't want to lose control of the Senate. And, he'd like some sort of outside chance at gaining House seats, if not taking the House over, which is very unlikely. And so, I think he's doing the only thing he can do. What I would say is that I think voters and Americans in general understand that in politics, the silly season sometimes reigns. But what you don't want to do is say things that are so outrageous that people start to turn you off and throw their hands up in the air and say, look, don't treat me like I'm an idiot, which in this case means I know the Republicans don't like you, at least they don't agree with you, and it's hard to get things done, but don't act like you have no role to play here. After all, you are the president, and if you can't get anything done without people being extremely very nice to you, which is unusual in politics, then what's the point of your being president?
Mr. Fund, a very good evening to you. I would like to stipulate to my experience, my grandfather and father were very good Republicans, Hoosiers, both of them, right? They liked apple pie to the day they left the planet, and they like it in heaven. So the president's exaggeration that the Republicans would be opposed to apple pie if he were for it, can we say, John, that he's just kidding us? Good evening, Mr. Fund.
Well, the silly season David referenced has arrived. The president is saying silly things. He's saying, so sue me, which makes him look frivolous and snarky. He's saying, they'd oppose apple pie. That's preposterous. He's saying, I don't do photo ops, the day after he did photo ops with beer and a pool table. This last week was the week the Democrats finally decided we no longer trust the political instincts of this fellow. It's not that the president has gone rogue, the White House has gone rogue.
Thaddeus, you're a recovering politician. Help us understand this. There comes a time when you know you're doing poorly in the polls and your party's going to get beat up at midterm. Is there one way for a president to carry on? If I recall correctly, Karl Rove and President Bush in 2006, before the massacre that gave us Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, they conducted themselves as if they were going to win, as if they were going to pull it out. Now, that was not successful, but it was what you do in the face of a sinking ship. The president seems to have taken another course. Is this wise, Thaddeus? Does this help him?
Well, there are times, I know that within our own caucus at the time, there were those who just wished the president would stop talking and kind of get out of the limelight because the unpopularity was growing so quickly. I think what President Obama is doing is he's trying to find ways to help the congressional Democrats that the congressional Democrats don't necessarily think are helpful. And one of the things that he'll do in trying to go out on the road for them in what is clearly going to be a campaign trip is to try to couch it in the terms of trying to reconnect with the average American to find out what their hopes, dreams, desires, and their angsts are. But as has been pointed out by your guest, he's supposed to know that already. He's won 2 national elections, and he is an American citizen after all, with due respect to some of those who doubt that. So he should know this already. So he's going to go out on the road, and the Democrats are going to sit there and go, oh, God, I hope he doesn't say anything that's going to make things worse.
David, the trip to the border did not happen, and I see repeatedly Democrats very uncomfortable with this. Did the president make an error? Can he catch up, David?
I don't know if he can catch up. It's possible that he did make an error. And I think the big problem with the pool hall photo op and the lack of the border photo op is that you have a crisis on our southern border, humanitarian at the very least. You have crises around the globe. And in the face of that, he looks like he's playing games and having fun. And it doesn't look good to our allies and foes abroad, and it just doesn't look like good leadership at home. It especially doesn't look good when all of this is going on, and the White House message for the week is the president wants to make this all about infrastructure.
Mr. Fund, does the president connect to the midterms? We're told repeatedly that his approval ratings are the best way to judge a midterm. However, at this point, has the decision been made that there's nothing he can do this or that way to change his approval ratings, so this is all one great big wash?
Well, you can certainly hope the Republicans make a fatal error, and there's 4 months left for that.
Right.
But seriously, his Hispanic approval rating has plummeted from the 70s to 44%. His overall approval rating hovers around 40. Senator Udall in Colorado did not even show up at the fundraiser the president was attending for him.
I know. He claimed he had to be back in Washington to vote for a nomination that won with 73 votes.
So Democrats are basically deciding he's on his own, and we're on our own. This is not a united partisan front for the fall elections.
And, John, because we can see this, then Democrats can see it. Does that make them more nervous, less nervous? Do they get happy feet and decide that they're on their own and become, let's say, cranky?
A Democratic congressman told me it's like the Democratic Party is like a caravan of cars going to a wedding. And you all want to get to the same destination, but the guy in the lead car who's showing the way is the president, and he's weaving in and out of traffic, endangering all the other cars. And the question he asked is, would you continue to follow the lead car?
Thaddeus, just one more time, checking in on 06. Is this 06? Is this 08? What does it feel like to you? Is there an analogy that the Republicans went through? Because it does happen to both parties.
Oh, it feels like a slightly smaller version of 2010, which will go the Republicans' way. As has been pointed out, it doesn't seem they're going to want to risk making a fatal error, so they won't be as aggressive. But in 6 and 8, the Dems were hell-bent for leather. They knew what they were doing, and that drive is what got them those 2 big wins in this wave elections. I don't see that drive out of the House Republicans or the Senate Republicans at present.
Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. John Fund of the National Review Online. David Drucker of Washington and Examiner. When we come back, we're going to do policy while the president enjoys himself. John Fund has a new piece on the Affordable Care Act, and David has a piece about Harry Reid and the Democratic Senate. I'm John Batchelor.